just had this dropped in for service. This is a Cornell Romany Pro, and this one has come in for service and a couple of other jobs, one of which is he would like to have a foot switch added to turn the reverb on and off. So usual way to do it, get a good pointer, is here's the reverb return, black one, tip to there, and it comes straight into the input grid of V2, so V2 pin 2. All we're going to do is break that connection and have a switchable socket that you can use a foot switch with just to turn that on and off. Quite easy to do. And then he just wants us to go through it and check everything else is okay. Nice amps, these. It's actually got an EQ foot switch as well, so you can dump out the EQ for extra gain if you want, or you cut it, or do whatever you want. And it's got the switchable output A, B, C, and D. Now this amp, it runs 6 L6s, as you can see there. 2 of them, but it's not 2 in push-pull. It's actually single-ended, and we call this parallel single-ended because it's 2 valves in parallel but running in single-ended operation. Okay, so I quickly got it on the test bench. We're driving an 8-ohm dummy load. I've got my signal generator driving the front end, which is a 1 kHz signal at 150 millivolts RMS. I've got my mid control on full, treble and bass on 0, reverb is off, EQ is in circuit, and I've just advanced the volume control up just to the point of clipping, and you can see the bottom of the sine wave clips before the top. See that? So we'll just back it off to where it looks symmetrical. We'll call it there. And we're getting 10.6, we'll call it 10.5 volts RMS into 8 ohms. And that's with our output switch on A. So 10.5 into 8 ohms puts us at 13.8 watts. Not sure how to do that. You do voltage squared divided by resistance. So 10.5 times 10.5, divide that by 8 ohms, gives us 13.8 watts. Now, what we don't know is at what point Cornell decided to rate this amplifier in terms of how much harmonic distortion. So about there will be 2 or 3% harmonic distortion. If we drive it further, that'd be about 5. So if we get it to 12 volts, 12 volts into 8 ohms puts us at 18 watts. Now I think this thing's meant to be rated at 20. So to get 20, what do we need? We're going to need, we can calculate it backwards, 12, somewhere between 12.5 and 13 volts. So let's drive that. .8 we'll call it. That's 20 watts output. Now, is that clean by today's standard? Who knows? Anyway, that's where we're going to measure it. So with the output switch in A, I'll tell you what, for ease of calculation, I need it to be a round number. We'll bring it down to 12. There we go. So 12 times 12 divided by 8 is 18 watts. So we'll say this is doing 18 watts, right? In output switch position A. If I move it to B, the output drops down to 8.8 volts, which puts us about 9.5 watts. Position C drops it down again, and it's quite squared off at that point. 4.6, which puts us about 2.5 watts. Okay, big drop down there then. And finally, in the final position, 3.5 volts is 1.5 watts. So In fact, let's get ourselves a zoom in. If I clean that up there, .6, which is around 1 watt, which I think is what they say this scales down to. So there you go. Very interesting. Now, because of all this switching and the way this works, it is parallel single-ended. It's just the way it drops in and out different valves and configurations. So it's quite confusing, but it is there. It is correct. So anyway, let's go back to full power. Got a nice sine wave on the scope. And we can see that if I advance the treble control, it changes. Bass control has an effect too. Okay, so again, there's not much working with this. The only thing I want to try is, let's say you're running treble, middle and bass at noon, you know, straight up, and we change the EQ to cut. So we're going to move it from, which I believe bypasses the tone stack. So we'll make it clean, 11 volts. If I switch the switch, you get quite a boost, 14.4, which bumps it up to around 25 watts. So wow, that's quite powerful. Anyway, Cornell Romani Pro. We're going to give this thing a service, we're going to go through it, and then we're also going to add a foot switch for the reverb. Okay, so reverb foot switch socket added. I've put it between the reverb driver and reverb recovery. So that's reverb driver, reverb recovery. That's the next stage there. Really easy to do. Tested it, works great, no issues. I finished servicing the amp. I've gone through it. It's running great. There's no issues. The only thing was the phase inverter should be an ECC81, a 12AT7, but he had an ECC83 installed in there. And if you want to get the voltage swing right for the output stage, then it needs to be an AT1. I called Cornell to confirm because I couldn't find the manual online. He said, yeah, it should be really easy to remember. 83, 83, 81, 81. Done. Anyway, so that's running great. Really happy with that. The customer's got loads of valves at home, he said. So we're going to put the 83 back in, but I'm going to tell him it needs to be an 81. It'll work with that, obviously, but it doesn't work to its full potential if you don't have that one in place. So he can do that at his own time, and I haven't got to charge him for a valve. But apart from that, we can bung it back in the cabinet and sign this one off. Good job.